So I think it's pretty obvious that Sony watched my first PSVR 2 video, which I made during the launch of the headset. And, they obviously made some notes because the main thing I critiqued the PSVR 2 at launch was that it should be PC compatible, as well as a cheaper price point. And both of those things seem to be happening now, which, to be honest with you, I am a little bit surprised. The price point drop was inevitable regardless, right? But it was it could have gone either way with the PC compatibility. They could have just dropped out and be like, we ain't going to invest any more money in this, or that was never our intention in the first place. Because obviously, as Sony with the PlayStation, is to make money from the games, sell the hardware at loss, make money from the games. And so making it PC compatible, they lose that edge because then you obviously bypass giving money to Sony by buying games from Steam, for example, which may even put into effect, the rumor mill that maybe there's a PC PlayStation platform incoming in the future, whatever shape that might take. Just like Steam, for example, who knows? But anyway, to go back to the original point, yeah, they did it. It's early reviews are starting to pop up. We have a look at how it will work on the PC. Doesn't seem as straightforward as it is on the PS5, which is a bit of a shame, but to be expected when they very clearly designed everything about the PSVR 2 to work specifically with the PS5. This is more of like a nice addition. What makes me curious, was this actually considered when they built this thing? Or was it more of an afterthought because of the low success of the PSVR 2, or just watching my ingenious video, which you should totally watch? Yeah, so that's kind of interesting because it does seem a little bit makeshift. You got an adapter which requires an external power source, which that alone is kind of annoying, I ain't gonna lie. On top of that, you're also required to use a less common DisplayPort connection in order to connect it to the PC, which is totally understandable. It's a faster connection needed for high fidelity VR, and this is a high fidelity VR unit, so with a high refresh rate, so to be expected. But in any case, yeah, it's not as simple a process as I was probably hoping for. It seems to be tied to Steam, if I'm correct. Yeah, as well as that, but which isn't a bad thing either. I like the idea of a PlayStation Steam partnership. I think that could work really well for both parties in the long term, because they both seem to have similar goals and what they want to achieve in terms of game ownership, for example. So that's that. And then, of course, we've got the price drop, which I believe is temporary, but we'll see if it sticks. 300 is what it should have released at as the max RRP, and then stores could have chosen to release at cheaper prices. So really, the only other thing I mentioned in my first video that's missing is backwards compatibility with the PSVR 1, but I never expected that to really happen at this point, so late in its life cycle. A year in, it isn't late into its life cycle, but late into the possibility of something like that happening, which would be quite a big undertaking if it wasn't designed that way specifically in the first place, which it wasn't. So that's probably not going to happen. But we do have two big achievements, essentially. One being the PC compatibility, which is the main point I made in that first video was PC compatibility. So I can't take that away from Sony for finally doing it. It could have been later. It could have been like 3 or 4 years after release. So yeah, it's appreciated. The big question is though, will it save the PSVR 2? Absolutely not. I can answer that for you guys. There's no need to guess. The PSVR 2 ain't gonna sell millions of units now all of a sudden that it's PC compatible. There was the news articles popping up recently of like a 2,000% increase in sales, whatever it is. But that's really just an increase over what it was selling before. And it probably wasn't selling great from what we can gather. So yeah, I just honestly, I mean, obviously there's a chance of it like doing a U-turn and becoming semi successful and being able to continue to some degree as a PC headset, probably more so than a PSVR2 headset for the PlayStation. So yeah, that was a possibility, but I just that's the really only big change I could see is that people it drops in price even more and it becomes like a cheaper option for PC VR in order to get some fairly high spec specifications for VR unit. There is obviously as well, a lot of premium features from the PSVR 2 missing on the PC compatibility, such as the vibrating headset, which is, quite a unique selling point. I don't believe there's any headsets that do that, any other ones, and a few other features. So that's kind of a bummer. But again, that makes me think that maybe this was purely designed for the PS5, and this is really an afterthought in order to try and get rid of the units they've probably got sitting around in a warehouse. The main contention now, after well over a year since release, is there's just no games. Like there's no games. There's some games, but really, really not enough. And you look at what happens to the Firewall 0 Hour developers, closing their studio because the game just didn't sell. Nowhere near as enough as it should have. It's an exclusive PSVR 2 game. Can't get it anywhere else, just like the first one was exclusive to the first PSVR. And to quote them, they did say when they closed that the VR market is just too small. And it's, it's a gamble. So that for me was a real blow, and I just don't think there's any real coming back. You also look at the release of the new Astrobot game on the horizon. There's no VR mode for that, with obviously Rescue Mission being one of the best PSVR 1 games out there. Still to this day, one of the best 3D platformers I've ever played is the Astrobot Rescue Mission game, which is kind of funny to say, because most people, when they think of Astrobot now, they think of the PS5 bundled in game, which is also, a phenomenal game. But I'll go on record right now and say that Rescue Mission is better, happily. I'm sure the new Astrobot game, the full featured Astrobot game coming out, could overtake that, sure. But the fact that that's not VR compatible, or at least like a VR mode of some sort, it's, on the one hand it's nice because then we get a flat screen full game version of Astrobot, which is great because it will release it to more people can play it. People loved it, the bundled in version, the playroom game, so now they get to really enjoy a Mario-esque full featured, full fat Astrobot game. So there is that. But yeah, I think that's it. I guess we'll come back a year from now, do another one of these videos to see if the PSVR 2 is still alive. I generally think this time next year, it's very likely it might be a discontinued device. It is, I'm afraid to say. It sucks because it's a beautiful piece of kit and I really, really liked the original PSVR. But it's not even overly Sony's fault. The VR market is small and it hasn't grown in a while now. It kind of peaked with the MetaQuest and as a whole, and it hasn't really grown since then. And it's becoming more apparent now to people that I think it may have been a passing trend, and maybe we're going to start to see the reduction not only of PSVR but of VR units in general. But yeah, I think it's, as a PlayStation fan, you're going to have to take it on the chin, move on, cut ties, move on. Come back to this, I don't know, 5-10 years from now. If there's a major breakthrough in VR technology, come back to it. But otherwise, I think it's time to probably call it quits. Which is a shame. But it's kind of my honest feelings, if I'm honest. That's it. So I guess we'll see what happens next to the PSVR 2 will be interesting. Maybe I will eventually get one because they're dropping in price, but for the time being, I just don't know why I'd play on it really. Which is a shame because again, I have built up a fairly, semi-decent sized VR1 library that's now just going to dust away into the digital abyss. But yeah, that's that. Till next time, Mark, Magic Beanbag, PSVR 2.